Tokyo, 1954. Production company Toho is taking a chance on developing a monster movie, Gojira, or as the film will later be known in the West, Godzilla. Toho hires the dependable Ishiro Honda as director, an up-and-coming filmmaker with a penchant for documentaries and specialty experience in underwater photography. Honda had just released Eagle of the Pacific the year before, a movie about how Japan was led into World War II. Honda had agreed to take on the project because he felt the script sensitively reflected his own regrets and grief about the war. Whereas Honda would be handling principal photography and directing the human-scaled actors in Godzilla, Toho taps another filmmaker to handle crafting the film's intense, unprecedented special effects. Enter Eiji Tsuburaya, Toho's resident special effects master, a man with a particular manner of slipping into trance-like states of pretend sleep on set, before suddenly waking up and darting around with directions for crew. Tsuburaya had been learning and developing cutting-edge movie magic techniques for the previous 2 decades, notably pushing his technological artistry even further for Imperial Japan's war propaganda films to create realistic life-size explosions and prop military hardware, photographed in miniature.
Godzilla becomes a smash hit, and Toho reaps a large profit. In the decade to come, the studio will release more than a dozen giant monster movies. Other Japanese and Western movie studios now want their own giant monster movie, with copy kaiju popping up as fast as studios can afford. This is the climate in 1966, when TBS, aka the Tokyo Broadcasting System, hires Eiji Tsuburaya and his newly formed Tsuburaya Productions to produce a science fiction show. The idea is to make something in the vein of The Twilight Zone or The Outer Limits, but with plenty of monsters that kids will be excited to watch. Thus begins what will become the first of the Ultra series, Ultra Q. The show focuses on a team of action scientists who research and combat the paranormal, including not just monsters large and small, but ghosts, aliens, and other supernatural phenomena.
Tsuburaya, even though he had created his own studio, had been and remains a company man, so he never stops working for Toho, which at this point acts as both investor and a sort of board of directors of Tsuburaya Productions. Thanks to this unique relationship, Tsuburaya devises a simple and effective means by which to cheaply create new monsters for the Ultra Q series. Tsuburaya and his staff will simply reuse old Toho monster suits. An old Godzilla suit is touched up and modified to create the Ultra Q series' first monster, Gomez. Other monster suits, props, miniatures, sets, and even sound effects are also reutilized to the fullest extent to cut down on production costs. Although the show is popular, TBS soon requests a new series in color and with more monsters.
Tsuburaya gets to work. Their new protagonist goes through many iterations of development, but eventually Ultraman is born, largely thanks to the illustration efforts of artist Toru Narita. Susumu Kurobe, who acted in an episode of Ultra Q, would portray Ultraman's mortal alter ego, Shin Hayata, while up-and-coming actor and cowboy movie fan Bin Furuya is cast as a suit actor for Ultraman because of his lean and tall frame. Although Kurobe and Furuya don't share any scenes in the series, a friendship is struck between the two actors. Much like Godzilla suit actor Haruo Nakajima, Furuya's identity is kept a secret for decades. Nakajima himself serves the series as fight choreographer, utilizing Furuya's karate and pro wrestling experience to inform Ultraman's grappler combat style. Nakajima would even go on to portray a couple of Ultraman's kaiju foes throughout the series. Furuya's costume, while light, is something of an elemental trap. Furuya quickly learns to fear both fire and water, as the suit proves to be extremely flammable, whereas the sealed latex mask has a knack for letting outside water in but none out, which nearly chokes Furuya into unconsciousness several times while filming.
With its keen understanding of what young audiences would want to watch, a unique superhero protagonist, and special effects on par with Toho monster movies at the time, Ultraman is a smash success. The series, much like Godzilla, goes on to spawn dozens of successor series and movies.
In 1971, production company Toei, not to be confused with Toho, hires manga artist Shotaro Ishinomori to develop a new action series, Kamen Rider. The series is notable for starring a human-sized superhero who is the first of his ilk to utilize henshin, or transforming from his civilian secret identity to a superpowered alter ego via a phrase and pose. The series revitalizes the tokusatsu genre and inspires dozens of similar series, many of them created by Ishinomori himself.
Fast forward to 1983. Soon to be college dropout, aspiring animator, and filmmaker Hideaki Anno stars in and produces an Ultraman fan film called Return of Ultraman, not to be confused with the official Return of Ultraman series. At a screening of the film, Anno meets another up-and-coming filmmaker, Shinji Higuchi, who would soon find work as an assistant modeler for Toho. Anno and Higuchi strike up a friendship and soon are producing fan films together. They soon go on to form an animation studio called Gainax.
1995, Anno and Higuchi at Gainax produce an anime series called Neon Genesis Evangelion. Anno serves as the creator, while Higuchi serves as the writer and storyboarder. The series is an international hit.
2016, after more than a decade absence from cinemas, Toho releases a new Godzilla, directed by the duo of Anno and Higuchi, dubbed Shin Godzilla. The Shin prefix was deliberately mysterious, meaning new, true, or God, amongst other meanings. The movie is a box office success and sweeps Japanese awards.
2022, Anno and Higuchi give Ultraman the same reboot treatment. 78-year-old Bin Furuya, who still goes out to eat with his Ultraman alter ego Susumu Kurobe, provides motion capture for Ultraman alongside Anno. The new film Shin Ultraman is released to Japanese theaters. Surprising none, the film is a hit.
And while this might sound like a comprehensive history to some, this truly briefest of overviews is what brings us to today.
Welcome back to Midnight Grappler Animals, home of Flub Nation. I'm your host, Lan, and with me I have a man who is not the size of a building, but rather the size of a rather spry human, Salt M. Bank. What an intro, am I right, Salt?
What an intro. We're trying something new today.
Yeah, we figured, I think after last episode we really wanted to up the everything.
Up the ante, the quality, and there's a lot of names and a lot of names that are helpful to understand. Like in that scripted intro, I wanted people to just sort of get to know what makes some of these people unique, and I think that helps provide a context for understanding what makes them interesting or cool.
Yeah, it was cool. Yeah, and we actually did that all in one take. There wasn't a single flub. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, we're just that good.
Yeah, no flex. So let's just get into it. Our topic for today is Ultraman or Ultramen, because we're going to be talking about quite a few Ultramans or iterations of Ultraman. Do we want to get right into it?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll say as like a preamble is it's kind of funny that this is a sequel of sorts to our first Toku Tuesday, because like I went into that with like knowing nothing about Ultraman, but we were reading a story about Ultraman's origin in the new Marvel Ultraman book. So this is kind of a reset, doing Ultraman's origin again.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like this time you're far more knowledgeable about Ultraman than you were in the first. And it's not to say that, you were wrong for not being knowledgeable in the first one, but I think it's going to be interesting for us to cover this with how much information or how much you've learned about Ultraman in the time since. It's been what, like 3 months.
Totally, yeah. I went into that Marvel book not knowing anything about the character, and now I've got to see a few different iterations, and I've got opinions, I've got takes.
Got opinions? So I'm gonna let you lead. Do you want to start with the original series? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, hell yes, I do. These episodes are roughly the same quality of the Toho movies at the time, which is, you can take either way. Like, you can
Oh,
either
it
see like,
actually it was the most. I think at the time it was the highest produced TV series in like Japan's history.
right, and so in these half-hour blocks, you're like watching a little Toho movie if you've seen all the Showa era Godzilla films. So that was a treat for me, like being a Godzilla fan. Now, I didn't watch every single episode of the series. I had like kind of a recommended playlist, so I still like got the overall story. But like something else I noticed going in is like the first 8 or 9 episodes, like they're pretty good, but they establish the formula right away. But after 8 or 9 episodes, I felt like the series starts to take more like stylistic dares, and like that's what actually really hooked me and kept me really excited finishing the whole thing. Particularly, and I know I'm one of many to say this, but the episodes directed by Akio Jisoji are so wild and like incredible that type of directorial style is in a children's superhero show.
Yeah, I think you can really see the shift. You can definitely see the shift at some point because I mean, I think there was not even like a significant gap between the release of Ultra Q's second to last episode and the debut of Ultraman. So they were really just going off that assembly line for the first, like stretch while they were really trying to figure things out with this thing. And yeah, like when they really start getting into it, that's when you really start seeing more of the stylistic choices. And I think you really start seeing it once you get to the next iteration, Ultra 7. I think that's when they really start taking, the sort of what can we get away with what materials and resources we have, and what we can get away with on TV. So it's definitely cool looking back on it now. So this was your first time watching through Ultraman like at all, right?
Correct.
Because it was funny when you brought this to me. You were telling me it's like, oh yeah, I'll say my part, and then you can talk about your experience with Ultraman. And honestly, I'm not that far ahead. For me, like for all things Ultraman, I had to take a swig there. My Ultraman experience is only like a few years old. I want to say I got into the series way later than I got into like Super Sentai or Kamen Rider, all that stuff. So I'd say around like 2018, 2019. And to date, I've only watched Ultraman, Ultra 7, Ultra Q, and like bits and pieces of the new generation Ultra stuff, so like X, Orb, Geed, whatever. So so last year in prep for Shin Ultraman, I rewatched the entirety of Ultra Q and Ultraman, and I'm currently going through a rewatch of Ultra 7, and then I'm just gonna go through the rest. Yeah, and it's definitely brought me better understanding of what Anno and Higuchi were trying to do with Shin Ultraman, especially in the very, very beginning. But like obviously in researching for this episode, I went through like an even deeper rabbit hole and like realized that these guys are like really, really fans of this stuff.
Oh, they're big nerds.
Oh, they're huge nerds. They're like the biggest nerds. Anno did what was it, an exhibition, and he said that his top 5 tokusatsu media include Ultraman, Ultra 7, and Return of Ultraman. And the 2 other ones are Godzilla and Mighty Jack. Like you can really tell that this project or Shin Ultraman was a labor of love for them, but I think more than that, it's that they have like a deep reverence for the original series, and yeah, like it's very easy to see where that's from. One thing I will say is that it probably isn't going to beat the Japanese Doctor Who allegations, um, because it is very much like a monster of the week. You know, they're all doing stuff different ways. They're interacting with society in different ways, and you know, the Science Squad and Ultraman have to sort
Yeah, I mean,
of, you know, like deal with it.
I think that's like really intentional in a way, because like they're with Tsuburaya making Ultra Q, like I think he was pretty open, like yeah, we're doing our own sci-fi show, and like everyone was doing that at the time.
Yeah,
Doctor
and I
Who,
think
Outer Limits.
the demand was to make Ultraman as marketable to the West as possible. So,
Right.
you know, like, yeah, it can make sense. It makes sense. Like, I'm not saying that as sort of like a detractor point, but
Well, I
you know,
mean,
like
even the actors were cast for looking like more Western,
yeah,
whatever that meant.
yeah. There's a lot to unpack with that. There's
Yeah.
quite a lot to unpack with that statement, but yeah, it is very much, yeah. If you're, you know, the boss baby tweet guy, you definitely would go getting a lot of Doctor Who vibes from this.
But I think that's like part of the charm of it. Like it, you know, the show obviously dates itself in many ways, but like that type of convention is something really of the era.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is like the history around it as well, just because you know how much they were not dumpster diving, but basically, you know, like taking hand me downs from Toho at the time.
Right.
Like with all the monster designs, you know, you got like Naranga, Gabora, Pagos, all taking from like the Baragon suit. So, and you know, there are other cases like we mentioned in the intro. Gomez was taken off of the Mosugoji, I think.
And it's partly the Mosu Goji.
Yeah,
They Mosu Goji being the suit used in Mothra versus Godzilla, aka Mosura versus Gojira, and they used other Godzilla suits for Jira. So
yeah, that's right.
they really made the most of what they had.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, like it's really funny, like coming into getting into Ultraman versus Godzilla fandom was funny because like before I even noticed the suits, I noticed with the SSSP, and that's for listeners, that's like the action scientist team,
Hold on,
like in their
I have
headquarters.
the it's a science special search party.
Thank you. I refuse to say that.
Okay.
When their like phones are ringing, I did like the Leo pointing at the TV because that's Ghidorah's cry.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, they're reusing everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's and the actor carryover is also very funny. You know, like Akiko Fuji, who's played by Hiroko Sakurai. Hiroko Sakurai played a different character, Yuri, in Ultra Q. And again, like we mentioned the the intro, both Susumu Kurobe and Bin Furuya were in Ultra Q. Susumu Kurobe is in like one of the later episodes, and then Bin Furuya played Keemer in Ultra Q, which is I think also later in the series. And then Bin Furuya would actually go on to play one of the Ultra Guard members in Ultra 7. So the actor reuse was great. And you know, this isn't just an Ultra thing. This was like a huge thing in Tokusatsu in the 60s and 70s. Like the director Muramatsu would then go on to play Tachibana in Kamen Rider, which is ding another thing for our later segment, I guess. But yeah, it's very very tough to say much about Ultraman. It's just one of those things where everyone realizes that it's good, and, you know, like the blueprints that it sets forth. I would say that personally, Ultra 7 sets forth more blueprints for what Tokusatsu would become. But you know, we'll get there when we get to the Ultra 7 episode, I guess, or the Shin Ultra 7 episode.
Yeah, I haven't actually seen Ultra 7 yet, so I don't have much context for it. I think like the sort of I could go a lot into like individual episodes. Mainly Akio Jisoji's episodes were the most standout to me, but I think like one of the overall impressions I want to cover before I move on from the original Ultraman is the violence and the politics.
Yeah.
The violence is like a double-edged sword of sorts, because like watching Haruo Nakajima's, you know, like trademark fight choreography is really fun. Like he's killing it, and like Bin is like going all out with like so. What I love too is like we're so used to like these like very highly choreographed fights now, and like so much of the fights is Bin just like jumping on the other monster, just like belly flopping.
It's like pure, you know, camp wrestling tactics. You know, just let me just jump on you. Let me just beat the shit out of you while I'm riding you. You know,
right? Like I love that part. That rocks. But then like the other side of the violence is like I started to feel like kind of down and sad through the series. Like Ultraman's like really mean to some of these monsters.
Like who was it? I think it was not Bora, but it was Jiras, wasn't it? Where he rips off his like gills.
Yes. Okay. So that's the episode that comes to mind. He tears off his like neck flaps. I don't know what to call it. Gills is fine, but like you see like the blood underneath like the where the tears have occurred, and I think that episode is noticeable too, because if I remember correctly, like that's the first monster that he doesn't just like zap. Like you see its like corpse, and like and that the other scientist villain is like overwhelmed at like this monster that he's helped raise like dying. Like it's weirdly emotional.
Yeah, it's I honestly don't know what they were thinking when they were doing that, but it really
I don't know
like,
either. It comes up a lot in other episodes too.
Yeah, there's the monster graveyard episode, like right
that one makes me so sad too, because like it's this really cool concept, right? Like it starts with them finding the monster graveyard in space, and the team is like developing some awareness. They're like, damn, maybe we shouldn't have been like so psycho killing all those monsters. And it's got that like that plot. I think it's a really memorable plot of this like skeleton looking Godzilla comes to Earth, gets stuck, feels like really sad. Like it has these sad cries as it's wandering around trying to figure out how to get back to space. Ultraman wants to do the right thing and help this monster get back, but instead of just like helping it, he's like beating the shit out of it.
Yeah. It's it's a tough line to cross, I guess, you know, just like the inherent evil versus not evil factor of all the monsters. And I think that's the one part where the Ultraman comics from Marvel actually really fail, is that, you know, they insist that kaiju are inherently evil, which is, first off, it's like a stupid thing to say in general, but you know, like Ultraman the original series explicitly showcases in various episodes benevolent aliens, you know, like aliens that are they just came to Earth because, you know, they just randomly ended up there. You know, they're trying to make do with their circumstances. Like the Pigmon episode comes to mind. So it's like the ultra violence is definitely it comes out of left field in some ways.
And I have kind of like a galaxy brain take that, you know, you can take it or leave it. But like hey, see what we did there? I mean, part of what I was really fascinated by in my research for Ultraman, and particularly the people involved, was you see this like straight through line from Imperial Japan propaganda films to Godzilla to Ultraman. Like it's all one unit to me, right?
Yeah.
They're not like separate things. And I read some pretty like harrowing stuff about like Honda in particular, but Honda, Ishiro Honda, not the company Honda. But with Tsuburaya in particular, like I was really fascinated that he does all these propaganda films, can't get work for a while after, and then, you know, ends up finding his way onto Godzilla and Ultraman. So my like, you know, making Ultraman, I mean. So my like galaxy brain take is that in this series where the SSSP is like starting to feel some remorse and some regret for killing these monsters so brutally, I postulate that it's this sort of dawning awareness of like maybe we were doing some really bad shit for Imperial Japan era. We're reflecting on it unconsciously, but we don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, that's sort of like they're grappling with it, but they haven't really come to a conclusion about like what those feelings translate to or what they want to say with the remorse, I guess they're feeling is, yeah, you definitely start to see more of it as the series progresses. And I guess later on you really do start to see more of the more explicit takes from them, I guess, in the work itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's that sort of awareness and philosophy that I think makes this show that's for 6-year-olds something that I can, you know, actually get some like I can chew into a little bit as an adult.
Yeah.
Was there anything else you wanted to cover with Ultraman 66 before we move on?
There's actually one thing, because
Yeah, go for it.
in my research for the Shin Ultraman section, I found that Ano and Higuchi did an interview with Hiroko Sakurai in 2003. Hiroko Sakurai, who of course played Akiko Fuji in Ultraman. And there's a bunch of like interesting tidbits that you learn from that interview, like the fact that the A-type suit, Ultraman suit, frightened Ano as a kid. So I think you had some questions about the A-type, B-type, and C-type suits, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I asked at one point, were they using multiple suits throughout the show?
Yes.
Because I noticed in the first few
Oh,
episodes,
he looks
Ultraman is
gnarly.
looking janky.
He looks
he's
gnarly.
he, he's lumpy, man.
Yeah, they had 3 suits over the course of the series, which are now known as the A-type, the B-type, and the C-type suit. The A-type suit, I think, is used for the first 9 or 12 episodes, and then the B-type suit is used until episode 29, and
Yeah.
then the C-type suit, which is what everyone knows nowadays, was used for the remaining 10, 11 episodes of the series. And if you the B and C type, I would say, you know, you'd have to look closely to really see what the differences are there, but there is no mistaking the A type. The A type is just like very paper mache looking. There's a lot
It's a
of
crafting
it is a
project.
crafting project. It is what, you know, like I shouldn't say it's what a child would come up with because that's very rude. But it is very much like something that was hobbled together because, you know, it was hobbled together, you know, like they were
Yeah.
given, I think, like a few months to switch from Ultra Q to Ultraman. So, you know, this the mask definitely does indicate that. And the suit itself, not just the mask, the suit itself feels much more fleshy in a sense, and less muscular. Uh,
I mean, it's so weird, the muscles, man. Like, especially that first suit, like his pecs are sitting so
oh
low
yeah,
and his delts are in the wrong place. Like, it's very weird.
yeah, and you know what? I can totally see why a young Hideaki Anno would be scared of that shit because
Right?
my,
I might be
I mean,
too.
yeah, I feel like if I was a 6-year-old and I saw that on my screen, I would immediately turn the TV off.
You know, speaking of suits, this reminded me of some research that I was trying to work in the scripted section, but I couldn't work it in like cohesively there. But one thing I think is really funny is like the Godzilla suit is really heavy. It's like 220 pounds, and Haruo Nakajima can only wear it for like 3 minutes at a time before he's gonna pass out from exhaustion, right? But the Ultraman suit, it's not like heavy. It's just really light.
Yeah, it's like
It's
a
got
wetsuit.
different dangers.
Yeah.
It's a wetsuit essentially, but like the color timer was like something they added last minute. They didn't have a weakness for him. I think it was Tsuburaya's idea or someone close to him.
It was Tsuburaya's idea. Toru Narita actually hated the idea because it felt his original design for Ultraman just had no color timer whatsoever.
Right.
But you know, Tsuburaya was like, "Wait, shit, we can't make this guy invincible."
Right. So that was like a funny parallel to me that like the Godzilla suit can only be worn for 3 minutes in real life, but like the Ultraman character in the fictional world can only be powered up for about 3 minutes.
Yeah. And it's become like an iconic part of the character since. I think Ultra 7 doesn't have it, but every other Ultra since Ultra 7 has it. So yeah, it is one of those things where the real life reflects on the work itself.
Yeah, maybe unconsciously again.
I guess so. I like it. It is tough to say because most of them are dead right now. How much of the creative decisions were conscious versus unconscious, and I guess there isn't very much translated content that would give us a better idea of that, or at least not based off of what I could find.
You can find some answers from like Bin Furuya. Like,
he's very vocal.
Yeah, but like at the same time, he doesn't answer some of these questions directly, and I don't think it's because of his age. I just think he like doesn't care, which rocks. Like I had so much fun researching Bin Furuya. He's so cool.
Yeah.
Like I think Bin's vibe is like he dresses like so nice.
Oh yeah, like he's got like the he is very much like a movie star, and he wants you to know that he's got the glasses, the dapper suits, and all that.
Right. He very much gives off a vibe similar to what Jim Steranko thinks he's giving off.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Jim Steranko, but not racist, I guess maybe.
Right. Probably not. Let's hope not.
I'm hoping he's not racist. Back to the interview. The A-type suit frightened Anno. He preferred the B-type suit. And Anno specifically says that the A-type suit looks more like a human with its like slightly agape mouth and textured skin, where the B and C-type suits felt explicitly like wetsuits. And then he says that his entire career path exists thanks to Ultraman, which I thought was very cute. But at one point during the interview, Sakurai actually asks Higuchi and Anno what they would do if they had the opportunity to direct their own Ultraman series. Again, this is like 20 years before Shin Ultraman came out. And Anno says that he would do the TDF, redo the TDF, the Terrestrial Defense Force, basically the guys above all of the Ultraman support teams, so like the people above the SSSP, whereas Higuchi says he wants to revitalize the aliens and the characters. And then he says that Ultraman was unanimously loved in the original series, but he doesn't think that would be the case in a modern context. His reasoning being that humans have yet to achieve world peace. So he questions if humans would even be willing to help him if he arrived on Earth today. And it's really interesting because these are like takes from 20 years ago, but you can see how it directly influences like the events of Shin Ultraman.
Yeah, I'd say they synthesized those two perspectives particularly well for their script and project.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you see more of Anno's handprint, I guess, from this on Shin Godzilla, where you really see more of Higuchi's handprint on Shin Ultraman. which I guess makes sense because Shin Ultraman was directed solely by Higuchi, whereas Shin Godzilla was both Higuchi and Anno. Anno did write Shin Ultraman though, and produce it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shall we?
I think the only
So go ahead.
the only other thing to say on Ultraman isn't even about the original series, but 2 series after, Return of Ultraman. Anno is a huge fucking fan of that show. He has like a replica of the transforming device, the Ultra Bracelet, and he owns the suit that they used in the show for Ultraman Jack.
I gotta say, these Ultraman names again,
yeah, it's like so the thing with Ultraman Jack or Return of Ultraman is it was meant to originally be a sequel where the original Ultraman would come back, but then they realized that may be a bit disrespectful to Tsuburaya because Tsuburaya had died like 2 or 3 years prior. So they decided to just create a new Ultraman who looks kind of like the original Ultraman, and they kept the name Return of Ultraman, even though the original Ultraman just doesn't show up in the series. And then throughout the series, the characters referred to as Ultraman, but then it was only later after the show had ended where they were like, wait, we have 2 Ultramans now. Let's just name the second one Ultraman Jack. So that's how Ultraman Jack became Ultraman Jack.
Speaking of multiple Ultramans, I just wanted to go back for a second. Does that mean that do you know anything about the creation of Zoffi in the original series? Was he made from one of the extra suits? Or did they make a new suit for Zoffi?
It is I think it was an extra B-type suit that they used. Or I think they recycled the B-type suit to make Zoffi's suit.
I would believe that.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's everything I got for everything Ultraman. And the reason I brought up the Return of Ultraman thing is it makes for a great segue to our next segment.
Hey, Return of Ultraman. So there's the Return of Ultraman, and then there's Daicon Films Presents Return of Ultraman. Yeah, I don't have too much to say here other than like it's notable because it's Anno making this fan film when he's like kind of fucking around in his classes and not committing to college.
I mean, it's really dope. And it's
dope as hell.
There's a button. The funny thing is not even the fact that it was like made at all. It's just the funnier thing was all the different iterations of people describing it, because it's been, or the events that led to the creation of Return of Ultraman, the fan film. I think I'm just going to refer to the fan film as Matt Arrow #1 Takeoff Order before realizing that's way too long. So I'm just going to say it's Anno's fan film.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's been so 2 published things that have talked about Anno's fan film. The first one is Kazuhiko Shimamoto's Aoi Hono, which is translated, that's like Blue Blazes, which is like a fictionalized retelling of the student lives of Gainax's founders, which obviously includes Hideaki Anno. And there's like a scene in that, so it's a manga that was turned into a J-drama, and there's like a scene where Anno shows off his fan film to the class, and the class is like going crazy. They're like, holy shit, how did he come up with this? And then, several decades later, several decades before, Anno's wife, Moyoko Anno, who is like a very, very well-established, respected shoujo mangaka herself, she put out a book called Insufficient Direction, which is basically a fictionalized account of her life with Anno and being like the wife of a huge otaku. And I think it's in chapter 12 where she summarizes Anno making Return of Ultraman. And it's like done in she's like, there's like a caption that says like director young. So it's it's been like retold a bunch of times, but it's always interesting to see that and then go back to the original fan film itself and watch it and be like, holy shit, yeah, this. I can definitely see why those students were going crazy.
It's like it's really daring. There's a lot of innovation happening there, and at the same time, it's also just kind of bad.
Yeah,
Like, I don't
I
mean that
mean,
to sound disrespectful. It's what a 23-year-old would make, you know?
I mean, at the same time, though, I would say that it is really impressive for what a
Oh
23-year-old
yeah.
would make. You know, like the explosions, especially. Like, where the hell were you getting these resources from?
I have so much questions about how they were getting their funding, and I found
Well,
partially an answer.
yeah, go for it.
Well, I can't answer how they got that specific funding, but like what they did when they formed the animation studio proper was they were making porn games.
Yeah.
That's fine. There's no shame in
No
that.
shame in that, you know. Many artists have, resorted to doing porn stuff when
I mean, hey, Akio
when money's
Jisoji went on to make porn after Ultraman. It's fine.
yeah, yeah. There was actually a director. I was on Twitter that there was a director who had directed nothing but like porn or arrow game stuff, and then he went on to direct like a bunch of well-regarded movies. I'll see if I can include in the show notes if I find it, but it's like really, really funny.
I mean, like one of the Gamera directors did a bunch of
Yeah, I
porn
think it
before he
was the
did
Gamer
Gamera. Like
director.
it's
Yeah,
just,
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
think it's like it's not a thing you see here in the West so much, but like over there, like I think it's pretty common. Like, yeah, you need work, you'll go work on porn.
Yeah, yeah. The only other thing I have to say about Return of Ultraman is that in 2001, Tsuburaya actually gave it its stamp of approval, and they allowed a limited edition DVD of it to be sold.
Oh, that rocks.
Yeah,
That's so
yeah.
cool.
And then last year, they came out with a remastered edition, which is put on Amazon Prime Japan. And the thing is, it's been subbed, but the sub's like several years old. So with this remastered edition, I'm wondering if I should or I could, make my own sub or scrub of it. So we'll see. We'll see. And yeah, there's a making of documentary of the fan film, which I thought was really cool. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I've got to say on Return of Ultraman, the fan film.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I meant to say this at the start of the episode, but better late than never. We're to get to Shin Ultraman. We're doing the original Ultraman and Ultra Q series. We did Hideaki Anno's fan film, but then before we get to Shin Ultraman, we are going to discuss Ultraman versus Kamen Rider. And you know what was funny was when I was like putting together all my notes, I was like, how do I justify this? And I was like, well, it's our show. We can do whatever the fuck we want.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, I even asked
but
you,
then,
it's like, why are you sure you want to do this here? And you were like, yeah, sure, why not? I'm like, all right, sure, why not?
and I leaned into why not, and then like right as I thought I was about to take it off, I was like, wait, like there is some extra context here we can say about both Kamen Rider and the nature of crossovers, and I think this also dovetails really nicely with just the sort of Shin brand or Shin universe, right?
Shin universe, yes, a Shin Heroes universe, even a Shin Japan Heroes universe, even.
Yes, that's its name.
But the summary of what Ultraman vs. Kamen Rider is, it's a TV special that was aired on July 21st, 1993, to commemorate the Ultra Series' 25th anniversary and Kamen Rider's 20th anniversary. Here's the thing, though. Neither of those anniversaries actually occurred in 1993. They occurred in 1991. But it's...
Come on, guys.
Come on. But there was... I mean, I can't necessarily blame them, because Shin Kamen Rider, which is coming out this year, was meant to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Kamen Rider, which is 2 years ago. So, they're just staying on brand, I guess.
It's just the thing. You just stay 2 years behind.
Yeah. It was like an hour and a half long special. An hour and 20 something of those minutes were just trivia segments and interviews with the actors, crew, Ishinomori himself, actually, and one of the Tsuburayas, which I think was Noboru at the time. Eiji and his brother had died already, so I assume it was Noboru. And then the latter 3 minutes, which is I guess what we're gonna talk about here, is the crossover segment between the titular characters themselves.
It's so cool. It's so fucking cool. It's maybe the best superhero crossover I've ever seen. I'm not exaggerating. It goes so hard.
It's insane to think how much production value they put into something that was like pretty much just like an anniversary, not even like a big anniversary thing. It was like a TV special. That's the thing. This wasn't made for like movies or anything. This was just like a thing that would air on TV like once or twice, and then they were done. And like both the kaiju and the kaijin for this special were original. They weren't like kit bashes of anything. So they went the whole 9 yards just to produce this 3-minute segment. But yeah, it's interesting to see how they brought it together. There's like parts where they use stock footage of Hongo and Hayata transforming, and then they like splice it together on screen. And then my favorite part is when they splice together the the segment where Ultraman rises up with like the spinny whirly thing that Kamen Rider loves to do, or the original series loves to do. Yeah, Salt, I want your thoughts on this because I have a connection to this that I'll get into later, but I want to hear your thoughts.
So I only found this because this wasn't even part of my Ultraman research originally. I watched a movie a few weeks back called Mechanical Violator Hokkaider. And Hokkaider is initially a villain from the series Kikkaider, which is another Ishinomori creation.
Yes,
which if you don't know Kikkaider, he's just more robotic Kamen Rider.
Yeah, if you don't, first off, if you don't know Kikkaider, get out of my face. I don't want to talk to you. Fuck you.
Anyways, I don't want to like go too much into all that lore, but Mechanical Violator Hokkaider rocked so fucking hard.
Yeah.
It was like the best sort of knockoff of Terminator and RoboCop, but like so fucking stylish. Like I swear to God, the Wachowskis must have seen this before they made The Matrix. Like there's just so many ideas in that movie. I can't get too excited about it because Mechanical Violator.
All I'll say is that Amamiya and Inoue were cooking with that shit, and we'll get into that when we do our eventual Hokkaider episode because we do have to do a Hokkaider episode.
We do. I finally watched an episode of Kikkaider and I'm like, this rocks. But anyway, Amamiya was how I found this. I was like, I need to see everything by this dude. And then I saw that Amamiya did Kamen Rider versus Ultraman, and like it had everything I love. Like it had the dynamic camera angles. Like one shot I particularly remember is like the villain like being reflected in the building as like during the fight. Like didn't need to do that. Looks great though. Right? That kind of shit rocks. Just again, like everything's so dynamic. Like really, like he's got graphic violence, but like in a way that's just so exciting. And I think where he really marries the two between the dynamic camera angles and the violence. My favorite shot is Kamen Rider is like driving up this like huge ramp towards the giant monster.
Yeah.
And you might be asking yourself, wait, how would Kamen Rider and Ultraman team up? They're totally different scales. So Kamen Rider gets to the top of this ramp. His motorcycle is driving so fast, he like blasts through the monster's peck and like explodes out of its shoulder like a bullet. And he does this with like a miniature Kamen Rider. It's so fucking sick watching the tiny Kamen Rider blow out of this monster's shoulder, spraying blood. And then next shot, Kamen Rider is gigantic. Did he get huge by traveling in monsters' blood? Who knows? Does it matter? Not really. Now he's big. Try to keep up, loser. We're doing this. It's such a good movie. That was my experience. I
Yeah.
loved it.
My experience is that I subbed Ultraman
I
vs.
watched your
Kamen Rider.
sub.
Yeah,
You did a great
yeah,
job.
thanks.
It was a
It was one of
fantastic
the first
subbing.
subs that I actually did. Like, or the first. I think I did this last January. Yeah, I definitely want to go back because again, I only subbed the 3-minute crossover segment, but I really do want to go back and sub like the rest of it. So that's how I didn't even know this existed until my quality control guy, Digits, shout out to you. Uh, sent me Ultraman versus Kamen Rider. He's like, yeah, do you want to do this? And I was like, oh shit, I didn't even know this was a thing. Yeah, sure, I'll do it. So yeah, we put it out. And yeah, if I have the time sometime this year, I might just redo the whole thing, the whole hour and a half. But yeah, it was really cool to work on. It was like, again, the amount of production value that goes into this is astounding, to say the very least. And yeah, I honestly don't have anything else to say other than, yeah, Ano wasn't involved in this, but it was just like really fucking cool.
Yeah, it rocks. And like in our show notes, we'll have a link to this with your sub.
Yes.
It goes hard. And I guess the only other thing that matters in regards to our larger conversation here is, unless I'm mistaken, this is the only on-screen crossover these two characters have ever had.
So far, yes.
Yeah, and we can address that a little further with the Shin movies. But shall we get to the main event, Shin Ultraman?
Yes, let's.
Hell yeah! Saw it in the theater right as I was getting towards the end of my Ultraman watch through, and I went with my girlfriend, who hadn't been doing the Ultraman watch through.
Shake my head,
like me.
Should have. Fake fans everywhere.
We're trying our best. We're trying our best. But yeah, it was cool because it kind of proves how much the Anno Higuchi system works. Because for me, I'm like, oh, I get what they're doing. They're retelling the original series chronologically with a little more cohesion between all the events.
Right.
And so I get that. I get what's going on, but like she didn't really know it as much, and she still had a great time. It's just a good movie.
Yeah. I'll talk about my first experience while watching it, but I rewatched it. When Fathom did the 2-day event thing, and I brought along a friend who hadn't watched any Ultraman whatsoever. And yeah, he was like thoroughly entertained by the fighting itself, but he also thought that the main story itself was also just told really, really well. So yeah, I think it's a good fun for the whole family, if you will.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting idea. I know you're just half kidding there, but like in an interview I saw with Anno, he's like, look, our approach is going to be that we're making an Ultraman for adults. This isn't for kids anymore. And like it's interesting. There's a lot to unpack there because he means that seriously. Like he wants more sophistication in it. Everyone in the audience, I'm pretty sure, was an adult, mainly because it's not a mainstream release. It was that Fathom event. But like I don't see an issue putting a kid in front of this. Like I think a kid would be pretty into it.
Yeah, I don't think that there's anything here that I would explicitly deem not kid appropriate.
Right.
I would say.
But I guess what's fascinating about that to me is like he's very much going, this is not going to be a movie for kids. But like that has a very different energy than like how we do it in the West. Like it doesn't smack of like edgelordism, you know?
It's the interpretation of what not for kids means. Like sophistication versus, gore and nudity and violence, I guess.
Well, and I wrote that in my letterbox that like he wanted this to be more sophisticated, and I think what I really admire about the approach Anno and Higuchi take is like more sophisticated to them. It just means refining the ideas further. You're not like hiding from how goofy the Ultraman concept is. You're not making anything darker for the sake of doing so. You're honing in a little further on what works and throwing out what didn't need to be there.
Yeah, like I know the phrase is overused, but this really is like a love letter to the Ultra franchise, not just Ultraman, but like Ultra Q as well. And I guess we can start with that, because so Shin Ultraman starts with a segment, which is basically half a recap, half sort of a montage, where you think that this is, you're going into Shin Ultraman, you're thinking you're getting just Shin Ultraman, but what you don't realize is that you're also getting Shin Ultra Q. Because everything in this little montage segment that explains how the SSSP was founded is pretty much taken from Ultra Q. Like the theme itself is the Ultra Q theme, which is used as like the backing to the montage, but all the monsters. So there's 6 monsters. So going from the top, there's Gomez. We mentioned Gomez in the intro. And a really cute detail is that they used the Shin Godzilla model to create the Shin Gomez model, which is a nice reference to how the original Gomez reused parts from the Mosu Goji suit. And this time, there's no Litra to kill it. In the original Ultra Q episode, it was like a fight between 2 monsters. It was like the epitome of the "let them fight" gif that everyone loves using. But this time it was the army doing their job. Hell yeah. And then we have the Mammoth Flower, Pegila, Larugeus. Again, these are all like shots and references taken directly from Ultra Q. Like they're
Is that the eagle?
Largeus is the eagle, yeah, like the big like chicken looking.
Man.
And there's
Yeah.
2 very nice shots. Like there's the castle shot and then it flying into the sunset. And to the person, to anyone who's not seen Ultra Q, that's like very funny because it's very sort of out there. But for people who've seen Ultra Q, those are taken directly from the episode itself. Like in the episode itself, Largus flies past the castle, and then the episode ends with it flying off into the sunset while like the kid it befriended is like waving goodbye. And then one thing my friend remarked to me during the segment is during the Pagila shot, the sub say female scientist discovers weakness, which again seems really weird at first, but then it was also like a significant plot point from the first Pagila episode. I don't know why they would include that specifically, but yeah, that is a thing. And then we have Pagos, which is, a nice thing to include, and Kaigel. So the whole thing here I really like is that not only is it like a Shin Ultra Q montage, it really helps build up the human element of the movie, both with like the foundation of the SSSP and also just how humanity responds to these kaiju events. Like all these monsters are met with extreme violence, except for Largeus, I guess. Like Gomez is... Or go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say they're met with extreme violence, but like the way it's edited is extremely violent too.
Oh
like,
yeah,
it's such effective storytelling. Like I think the audience kind of jumped as soon as Gomez comes on because like all of these shots are like 5 seconds long. It's coming at you so quick. Like
yeah, and
monster
it's all
appears.
Jump cuts. It's all jump cuts too.
It's all jump cuts, but like it rocks.
Yeah,
it establishes so much narrative, I guess would be the word. It gets so much established in a way that is like exciting, but like confident.
Yeah, I think I timed it. It was like a minute and a half, and you're pretty much by the time that minute and a half is over, you pretty much have an idea of like, all right, this is what's happening. This is who the SSSP are. This is a threat. These are the threats that they have to deal with. Now let's get into it.
Right, and it sets the stage really well.
Yeah,
you're like, okay, like this is a Japan that is going to be attacked by giant monsters on the regular, and it's been like sort of normalized. And like, hats off to Higuchi and Anno because like that's a thing that you could make really There's a lot of implications in there, is what I'm saying. And they managed to do all of that while making it feel thrilling and a little bit funny. Like
Yeah.
it's there's a really delicate tone they're striking that I liked.
One thing I really liked is the portrayal of the SSSP here. It's far more bureaucratic, than in the original show, and I think this is where like Ano's influence really, really comes through. Uh, it's funny, SSSP doesn't even mean the same thing in this movie. It's the S-class species suppression protocol, which is like the most bureaucratic thing that you can think of. And like in the original show, the SSSP have these like really nice colorful suits. They're all orange, and it very much
They have
feels.
awesome camel toes too.
Yeah, sure. I wasn't paying attention when I was. That's not something I was paying attention to, but
Those suits didn't fit good, is all I'm saying.
okay, good to know. Yeah, but they don't have that here. They have more, black and white suits, which is again more of the bureaucracy at hand. These are pretty much just suits, government bodies effectively working on dealing with this. And again, in the original show, the SSSP is a much more international organization. Like we see like French SSSP members, whereas here the SSSP is specifically a Japanese organization. And we even get like a cheeky sort of, oh, these kaiju attacks are only happening in Japan. Little passing comment early in the movie. But it also plays into what we'll get into later with the whole globalism aspect of it, that this is very much a Japanese movie.
Yeah, do you want to keep going through the plot beat by beat and unpack things as we go?
Sure, yeah. So from there on, we get into the first major battle, and I guess the introduction of Ultraman through what I call the Bemular problem. So in the original series, the first episode, the reason Ultraman comes to Earth is because he is chasing an extraterrestrial criminal named Bemular. And Bemular is the first villain that Ultraman faces in the original series. It's also the reason why he merges with Shin Hayata. So this movie doesn't have Bemular, and I think that's a bit of a problem. Because Bemular's presence is both a good intro to Ultraman's powers, and it also explains why the hell he's here. Like in the movie, he just kind of shows up. In Shin Ultraman, like there's no sort of like he was chasing anything or like he crashed onto Earth or anything. He just shows up one day while this is happening. But it's obviously the fight where Shin Hayata gets caught in the crossfire. And so the alternative to that they do here is kind of funny, where it's not even like an aftermath of the fight or like in the crossfire of the fight that in this movie is Shinji Kaminaga. It's not that kills him. He just gets killed when Ultraman lands on Earth, which is funny, I guess, but it's also just sort of it paints a nice idea of the wanton destruction that just stepping down on Earth has for Ultraman. But in this case, since we don't have Bemular, we have Naranga, which is, first off, Naranga is a great kaiju. Don't get me wrong. Like, lots of great stuff that you can do with Naranga, but it takes away the extraterrestrial element of the movie by placing this kaiju on Earth. When it really could have been a moment where humans, like the humans of the movie, could witness two extraterrestrials fighting and are kind of just left unsure of what judgment they can make about them.
Yeah, I mean, I think to address that, you're right if I jump way ahead in the plot, and it's It's because Ano and Higuchi are trying to take the original series and like synthesize it in a way so that there is an overarching plot
Right.
that doesn't exist in the original series. But they kind of, it's almost a retcon by saying that like, well, the strings are being pulled by Zerub and Mephilas here. And that they are the ones responsible for these terrestrial kaiju who have been here all along now being awakened. And so I think by doing that, they're trying to like raise the stakes from like, well, first we have terrestrial monsters, and then we have aliens, and then but those aliens are actually shitheads, and then we have an actual like scarier alien with Zoffy at the end.
Yeah, we get like 2 fights with kaiju, which I think was interesting. I feel like we could have cut that down to maybe 1 fight with the kaiju, because we get.
See, this is where I disagree.
Really?
I wanted
You
more
wanted more?
fights with kaiju.
We had a whole montage segment with kaiju, and now you want. I feel like you might have, if we were gonna do more kaiju, I feel like it should have just been another montage segment. You know, where Ultraman just like beats a bunch of kaiju, and you know you sort of see, you know, like human reaction sort of warm up to him as he's like dealing with all these kaiju threats. But in this case, we only have the 2. We have Naranga, which is how we were introduced to Ultraman, who's a nice silver shade in this one, in this fight. And then when he comes back after being merged with Kaminaga, we have the fight with Gabora, which I think is one of the best fights in the movie. And yeah, the Gabora fight's really, really fun. There's the flippy move he does to, you know, kick Gabora back. Yeah, I don't know if there's really much more I can say about the Gabora fight itself. Do you have anything you want to say about that?
No, but you know, talking about Shinji, sorry, I'm missing his name.
Kaminaga.
Kaminaga. That's a really interesting point. I'd like to stick on for a second. Is that like I saw I saw so many bad reviews of this movie, man,
Really?
and like reading all the bad reviews, I was just like, okay, this is why our episode needs to be extra good. When I say bad reviews, it's not that like I disagreed with like how much they enjoyed the movie. Most of these people liked it. I just think they're reviewing it like idiots. And like one of the reviews I saw that was really stupid was they're like, oh well, Ano and Higuchi are like faithful to a fault. And like I would disagree.
No, yeah,
like I
definitely
think they take, again, this is what I said earlier, like they're taking what works and like embellishing it. But like I think what's key to that is how much they throw out. And what I find to be a really fascinating detail about their process is the SSSP, as you already said, is a different organization. Its name means something a little different. But what's also really key is they're not trying to recreate those same members. Like when you have an American superhero film, Captain America has to be Steve Rogers, Batman has to be Bruce Wayne, et cetera, et cetera. I really admire the fact that they said like, fuck Shin Hayata, fuck the rest of this crew.
Fuck Ide. You don't need a comic relief character. They're all comic relief characters. No.
Right, exactly. They're like, it's not important like who the individual members are. It's just important that you resonate with the humanity of the people in this group.
Right.
And they just made up new characters. Like that's something that would never happen here in like Western superhero media. Like I think that was a really cool, good idea.
Yeah. I think I was skeptical at first about like what they were trying to get at when they did like this was back when it was announced, right? Like, you know, like what were they cooking? But the end result, I think, makes for some of the best moments in the movie itself, especially near the end, with the human characters. But you know, we'll get to that when we get to that.
We'll get that.
But the one thing I actually do want to highlight with the Naranga and the Gabora fights is the design of Shin Ultraman himself.
No color timer.
No color timer. So this is very much a design that is true to Toru Narita's an incarnation of truth, justice, and beauty design. So there's no eye holes, obviously, because it's in this one they don't use CGI. They actually use Bin Furuya and Hideaki Anno for mocap. But you know, so Ultraman himself the CG, the monsters are CG. Because obviously there's more you can do when they're CG. But there's no eye holes, there's no color timer, there's no dorsal fin in the back. So one thing about the original Ultraman suits is that they all have this nice little dorsal fin at the back to hide the zipper on the suit.
I gotta jump in. They don't all do. That first suit doesn't have it.
Oh,
And the zipper is so obvious.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
So you realize quickly, oh, the fin is there to hide the zipper.
Yeah. But yeah, there's no color timer, no dorsal fin, and no eye holes. And the first time we see Ultraman, he is silver, which is like a nice playback to the birth of Ultraman stage show. So there's a stage show they did before the show even began that was like in black and white. So this is like their take on oh right, Ultraman used to be black and white for like a little segment.
That is fun.
But my favorite detail about the first contact model, if you will, is that the face resembles the A-type Ultraman suit. Which is the suit that freaked the fuck out of Hideaki Anno as a child. And then, after he merges with Kaminaga and he gets all that color, the face actually changes too to look more like the C-type Ultraman suit. And I thought this was funny because, like we mentioned earlier, the A-type suit is a lot more fleshy, a lot more human looking. Like the mouth really feels a lot more human, right? And this is an Ultraman form where he has no humanity inside of him. This is like the most alien Ultraman, and it's the Ultraman face that looks the most human. Whereas after he's merged with Kaminaga, he has a much more alien looking, smoother face. So I like how they sort of flip that for the two of them.
Yeah, I didn't notice that. I'm looking at the different incarnations right now throughout the film. I mean, I guess like I do think that's a fun detail. I think what I was like really struck by watching it was just the proportions being different because he's so like lean and thin. I thought that was a really cool choice. Like it really highlights his alienness.
It's almost like they're in a sense caricaturizing Bin Faria's proportions. Like Bin Faria is obviously a very like tall, wiry man, but like this Shin Ultraman model takes that to a much greater extreme. Even like he's a lot more lanky. He's a lot.
He reminds with those proportions and the face and all that. What he ends up reminding me of a lot is like the Western perception of like alien grays.
That's interesting.
And I don't know if that's intentional or not. It's just that's what I got. I was like, wow, like this looks like when I was a little kid, like you could buy these like stickers with like aliens and like alien heads, and like he reminds me of those.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the one thing I really like is like the patterns in the eyes themselves. They feel a lot more biological, I guess. Like what are they called? The compound eyes on an insect.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I mean, speaking of biological, like a detail I love that I think this was more Higuchi, but it was probably both of them. But like, anytime he's on screen, especially when he's up close, like you can see the wrinkles in the costume where he's like creasing his shoulder or his elbow or whatever, and like it just raises all these interesting implications, right? Because it's like, oh, like they're obviously homaging the wrinkles of the original costume, but like in this case, like that's his skin. Like, what
like
the
does he
hell?
just have skin that like is his skin like wetsuit like?
That's so fun. That's just such a fun detail that like I guess an overall impression of this movie that left me just so happy was that like it's so weird, and it's not doing the weird thing that, again, like say like Western films do a lot. It's like, we're making a weird superhero movie this time, and it's like anything but, like Doctor Strange or whatever. It's like that wasn't really that weird. This movie is so goddamn weird. And I love that.
Yeah, it's like I wish we could see what Toru Narita feels about this movie, but obviously we can't because um, reasons.
Right.
He died in 2002. But because a lot of the designs in this movie are taken directly from his own designs, like obviously like we mentioned, Shin Ultraman himself takes from one of his artworks, but Zarab and Zeton as well are also based off of Narita's original concept art for the original series. And it's interesting to see the moves they make. Some of them are lateral, some of them, like um, basically elevate or iterate on those original designs. So I guess we'll get to Zarab next because he's the next alien we see after Gabora. And
Dude, the audience was so fucking amused with Zarab.
Zarab
Everyone
is
thought he
so
was
good
so
in this
funny.
movie. My favorite part about Zarab is that he's voiced by Kenjiro Suda. He was who, again, aside from voicing literally everyone and everywhere, he. So at the time that this first time I saw this was last year. At the time, Kenjiro Tsuda was also voicing a character in Kamen Rider at the time. So it was funny seeing like the differences between the two. Like they're both very vile, sort of like two timing characters. But seeing Suda's take on Zarab being like, "Oh, I'm just a little guy. I'm just a little guy," like, "Oops." I'm just here on Earth. I can help you out. Oops. Uh, yeah, Zarab in this movie is fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed his presence. For
I mean, Zarab and Mephilos both have that to an extent, and what I really liked about them is that they were both wheeler dealers. They're
yeah,
there to like concoct schemes and like kind of get a kickback, but like there's nothing like this is like there's no there's really no it seems like they could be doing something much more ambitious with their time.
yeah, like they're literally just doing it because the Earth has reason. There's not like because they're obviously not mustache twirling villains, but at the same time
Right.
they feel like bureaucratic villains in a sense. And again, maybe this is more
They
of the
are.
Ano influence, but like Zarab, he comes down to Earth, he meets the SSSP, he's like, "Hey, I'm Zarab, I can do this." And then the first move he makes, he goes to the government. He goes to the government, he leaks Ultraman's identity. He's like, "Hey, this is Ultraman. What the fuck are you guys gonna do about this guy? And don't worry, I know what you can do about this guy." And he immediately starts exchanging papers and whatnot. The bureaucratic approach to Zarab in this movie is really, really funny because it's not like the bureaucracy in Shin Godzilla. This is very much like an almost cartoonish kind of bureaucracy.
Yes, yeah, it's definitely the other half of it. I mean, I think Zarab really works for me too for the same reason that like Darkseid works. Like there's an analysis of Darkseid that says like the reason Kirby understood Darkseid more than most people after, aside from creating Darkseid, is you meet Darkseid and he's like he's on your couch when you get
Yeah.
home. Like that's like a thing that like a lot of people don't know how to do with a villain, right? And similarly with Zarab, like one of the like freakiest moments with him is like when he's waiting in Shinji's car
Oh yeah, yeah,
and he
yeah.
puts the hand on his hand. I mean, it's a great callback to the original series. That's the same shot that's used in the spaceship. But
Right.
it's just also so weird, and him being in the trench coat.
Yeah, the trench coat is the funniest thing. The trench coat, like when he shows up in the trench coat, it is very much. You know what it reminded me of? Uh, the '90s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies where they would like
Yes.
dress up in trench coats.
Raphael.
Yeah, yeah, Raphael in the trench coat. And
Yeah, Zarab is such a weird little
I
guy.
really
He
liked that you couldn't
rocks.
see the back of him. Like it was pretty much just like a 2D plane of his front half, and then the back
Well,
half
then
was
he does
invisible.
turn later in that fight, right?
Yeah. Because
And
he takes off the jacket, obviously, and like when he's walking, it's pretty much like if you were seeing, and maybe I'm dating myself with this reference, Flat Stanley.
I don't know what you're talking
Oh
about.
man, okay, maybe I did date myself with that reference then. Yeah, it's like Flat Stanley if he was an alien. Um, One thing I really liked about this Arab section was how it built the relationship between Ultraman as Kaminaga and Asami, who is our
Yes.
Akiko equivalent in this movie. Because the first time you really see them interact, it's like it's Ultraman trying to get an understanding for what kind of people humanity are. Like, oh, you guys are a herd. Is that what you are? It's like, what does it mean to be a colleague? What is a buddy? And seeing that sort of evolve into her saving him and him realizing, oh yes, this is the power of a buddy. And just like
Yeah,
even
it's
just
very
him
much.
entrusting, like his beta capsule to her, I think is a really, really great way of showcasing Ultraman's own growth throughout the movie without actually, doing the tell thing. It's very much a show versus tell thing.
Yeah, this movie really exceeds with show versus tell. I mean, Masami was interesting to me because, like you talked about, there's this element of friendship and trust that builds between both her and Ultraman, and how that's threatened at various points by their own decisions and weaknesses. But I think what else I was really kind of latching onto here with her was like the subtlety of like sexuality,
Yeah,
because there's two distinct fetishes that are brought up here. Like right after we meet her, we see her like slip into like her walking shoes into like the heels,
mm.
and that's shot in it. There's a way they could have shot that where like you just saw that was the action, but they shoot it in a way where those toes are coming at you.
Yeah. You really get to see a lot of toes in this one.
Right, and to tie it back into like Zerub, like Zerub. Oh, sorry, no, that comes up later. But uh, we'll be bouncing around a little bit for a second. But like she's turned giant later in the film by
Mhm.
another alien, and like there's another fetish that comes into play. So
I mean,
there
hold up.
was
First
some.
off, that goes back to the original series. That's
Right.
a decades old fetish, if you will.
It's a classic fetish
Yeah.
because so that was funny is like I watch it and they sort of tease that she's gonna turn giant at one point when she gets the capsule.
Mm.
And I actually hadn't gotten that far in the Ultraman watch through yet. I was thinking like, oh, this is the classic trope of like a woman turning giant. But then, like you said, that was a thing from the series. And it's also acknowledged as a fetish in this universe with like all the videos on YouTube,
Yeah.
right?
The reaction I thought was very interesting because, like in this movie we see a lot more of humanity's reactions to aliens than we do in Shin Godzilla or their reactions to Godzilla. Like especially the realistic elements of it. Um and it's really funny when Mephiles is like, "Oh, I had not realized that humans were such perverse beings." But yeah, it is very
um,
like not necessarily even explicit, but it is very like straightforward with acknowledging that yeah, this exists and this is a thing, and like these are humans, like this is, and we'll get into this later with the humanity aspect of it, but yeah, the human reactions to the fetishy elements of this movie are handled. They're handled.
Yeah, it was a thing where like it was. I guess the only thing I want to say about the fetish stuff is like it's male gaze, but it's like it's done in a way that like it's kind of quick and it's not lingering on some of those aspects
Yeah,
too long. Like
yeah.
it's something you're meant to think about, and I haven't quite figured out why it's there, but I it's something
Like
I'll keep meditating
I
on.
want to say that's the Higuchi element of it. I feel like that's the
Sure.
Higuchi influence there, but Yeah, I do like
It's
that none of it really gets dwelled on, like
right.
I
I
feel
like
like
that because it's like,
other directors might have dwelled on it just a bit more.
and I haven't seen that in many like action or superhero films. Like I'm used to two kinds of sexuality. I'm used to like either the protagonist and love interest like just sucking face and drooling on each other at the end, or I'm used to like the more modern idea of like no sexuality.
Maybe we should watch Anno's Cutie Honey movie at one point, because
Okay,
that's I feel like
I'm
that's a
down.
good corollary to this part.
Yeah, but I guess to get back on track with our synopsis, the sort of big conclusion with Zareb is like you said, he's like, "Hey, do you know about Ultraman?" He's doing that to the government, and then tries to ruin Ultraman's reputation by, Zareb makes a fake Ultraman, turns himself into Ultraman, and then Masami returns the beta capsule to Shinji, and then Shinji is able to restore himself as Ultraman and then beats back the imposter.
Yeah, I really liked that because in the original series, the imposter Ultraman, or the Emmet Ultraman, if you will, um, is a lot more explicitly a fake. Like the eyes, the everything is a lot more.
Kept the eyes here, which
Yeah, but
rocked.
like here, it's a lot harder to tell which Ultraman is the real
Right.
Ultraman, and I think that's a point in this movie's favor, is that like humans aren't stupid. Where they're not. They see an Ultraman who is like very explicitly different to the Ultraman that they've been seeing, and they'll point it out. But this one, it's a lot harder to point out from the get go that this Emmet Ultraman is the imitation. The only thing that really differentiates him is the eye shape, and the layperson isn't really going to be focusing on the eye shape when they see any Ultraman, honestly. So it was really interesting to see how Zara played into, I don't know, is this commentary on like the state of fake news? Not to put on my tinfoil hat or anything, but it it
I
it, it is a very interesting take on how quickly things can propagate, because Zareb creates this imitation Ultraman, and the government is immediately to like work against anti-Ultraman protocols, right?
yeah. I mean, I think what's key there is that the
Foreign
government.
influence. Foreign
Well, that is
disruption.
definitely something I want to talk about more later at the end. Yeah, but I think it's also representing like the government's like quickness to violence. Like they've already had this discussion with Zareb before he poses as Ultraman. That like, I mean, isn't Zareb like promising them like new weapons or something?
Yeah, Zareb's like promising them, like the secrets of Ultraman's state of being, I guess, and just like offering up a way to defeat him. Should
Yeah,
it
I
ever
think
come
the
to it.
government is like, I'm not to disagree with the fake news thing, like that could totally be there, but like I sort of interpret it as the government's like, oh yeah, let's fuck that guy up. Like
Yeah,
they
it
just
is
really
the
want to like
insistent
kill
the
something.
the insistence to go back to like their usual, and I think this is why the Shin Ultra Q segment works so well, is the rapidness of the government to respond to these monsters is such a far cry from what we see in Shin Godzilla as well. Like this is a government that is actively looking to beat the fuck out of these things.
Right. That's what I got out of this section. And something again on the question of narrative, it's the synopsis we're giving kind of sounds like, and then this guy shows up, and then this guy shows up, and that's kind of how the movie goes. That's something I really love about the movie, is that episodic nature.
Yeah, like it toes the line of being a villain of the week kind of thing without actually being a villain of the week kind of thing. Like
Right.
thing one finishes, and suddenly we also have to deal with thing two. Like they finish defeating Gabora, and they're discussing next steps when, oh shit, Zerub has been in the room for the past 5 minutes. What are we gonna do about that? And then like Zerub gets defeated, and everything kind of goes back to normal. But the next day, Asami,
the goat shows up.
yeah. So let's talk about Mephiles, because Mephiles in this movie is fantastic.
Mephiles rocks. Like, again, this is another example of like I don't think you can make the claim that they like were too close to the source material to a fault.
Yeah, they didn't
because,
make
like,
Mephiles thick enough in this one, honestly. The original Mephiles, he's got
those
buns,
hips.
he's got buns,
Yeah.
but this one doesn't.
But I mean, like, I don't mean this to like cast shade on the original series. Like, I think the episode with Mephiles is memorable. Like, his actions are memorable, but he doesn't necessarily have like a memorable personality.
Yeah.
He's another like cackling villain. But in this, they gave him such a specific personality. Like, what were your impressions of Mephiles the guy?
So first off, they did a fantastic job with the casting. They got Koji Yamamoto to play Mephiles, and I think it's probably one of the best choices that they could have made.
Dude, that guy rocked.
He's so good. And I saw someone on Twitter say that they Tumblr sexy manned Mephiles in this movie, and I hate to agree, but yeah, they kind of did. Like Koji Yamamoto, he's a good looking guy. But
I mean, everyone's extremely sexy in this movie.
Yeah, that's true.
Like,
that's true.
It just fits.
That's true.
I think they got a guy who could just like look a little perverse all the time.
Yeah, like
and that's work for me.
The great thing is he always looks like he knows more than he's letting on.
Yes.
Like when he shows up for the first time in his human form, it's in that like little bunker with like the SSSB guys and also their government contact. And he shows up and he's like, don't worry, guys. I got a solution. Let me help you out. And I like it because it's, in a sense, it's a continuing on from the thread, I should say, of Zerub, like showing up and, offering his help. But this one feels different because if it was the exact same thing, obviously they would recoil to it. But here, Mephiles feels a lot more benevolent than Zerub does.
He's got this like smooth talking salesman vibe, which like I love so much. Like
there's no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, even though Zerub and Mephiles are different, like what I love is how much this movie sets up these guys as like weirdos who seem like they kind of ran out of options on other planets and now they're gonna like sell their wares here.
Yeah. One thing I really like, because we see Mephiles go really, really far, further than Zerub, but I think the interesting thing there is that Mephiles has a human looking form. Like there is a form that looks like Koji Yamamoto. Zerub doesn't, right? So you can see the difference in the government's approach to these things. When the government's talking to Zerub, they are talking to Zerub knowing that he is an extraterrestrial. But when they're talking to Mephiles, it very much feels like a government dealing. Like this is a diplomatic. These are peace talks.
Right.
And there is a larger point to be made there about how this movie treats its aliens, and especially the humanoid looking ones versus the weird guys, like the little freaks.
They're weird guys.
Little freaks. But yeah, Mephiles is fantastic. I think he offers the best broken mirror to Ultraman, in a sense, because of his intentions for humanity versus Ultraman's intentions for humanity. And it's interesting that they would put Mephiles right before Zophi, because Zophi also has, like his own thing, but Mephiles feels very much like the lead-in into the movie's more existential quandaries, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of abstractism, I almost want to say. Like, I think one of the most captivating scenes for me in the whole movie, it was with Mephilos, when Mephilos and Ultraman in their mortal forms, they're talking for a while, and there's part of this talk is in a restaurant, which is a good scene.
Yeah.
But there's another part of it where they're in a park. And the scene with the park like blew me away, because you see there's like children playing on play structures, right? So there's this meaning already of like,
the future of humanity, basically.
The future of humanity, right? And like they will grow up and become like, the people making all the decisions later, and here's two gods talking about what to do about that.
It's but I thought intimate moment too. Like the izakaya one, that one's also very, but I think this one, even though it's in an open space, it feels a lot more intimate, both in like the nature of what they're discussing and
right, they're discussing these like extremely like grave cosmic level concerns, but it also works on this meta level that I thought was really beautiful, because what you see is two grown men swinging on swings, right? And like, what are we watching but like grown men playing with toys? But that goes even further with intersplicing between them and the children. And then the shot that just blew me away was you see Ultraman and Mephilos facing each other, but shot from below to look at them. And they're titans. They're using the same filming technique that they used with the tokusatsu suits.
Right.
So it's this like really, it's like reflections of like how you see adults, right? And like how you see these shows when you're a kid versus how you see them when you're adults. Like there's so much going on in that one scene. I loved it so much.
Encapsulation of what Ultraman is. Like before anything, like it so much more than anything before it or anything after it. This was like their thesis statement. This
exactly
encounter between Mephilos and Ultraman is them going, this is what we want to try with them, or this is what we're doing with our movie. Not even trying, they're doing it. So yeah, Mephilos, he gets pretty far, but then we get this really, you know what we didn't mention with the fetish segment? Horrible segue, I know, but the part where he's sniffing up Asami.
That's right, that's another fetish, the sniffing.
The sniffing is, yeah.
So I've been thinking about it a lot, and like, while I don't have a cohesive thesis statement, I think something that's going on here with the fetishes is like, they're just funny, for one. Like, a little kink shaming is okay. Sorry. But like, also, I think there's something to be said that like, this movie is very much dealing with the reality of like men who play with toys too long, and how like they're maybe a little more likely to be into some weird fetishes. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of reckoning to be done there with there, but yeah. So the way they defeat Mephilos,
there's something there. Is all I'm saying.
The way they get the upper hand on Mephilos, if you will, is Shinji or Ultraman as Shinji, I should say, sniffs up Asami to get the essence of the plank brain. Again, more science mumbo jumbo. There's a lot of science mumbo jumbo, especially in the latter third of this movie.
It rocks.
And yeah, he sniffs her up. He gets a feel for what the plank dimension is, and he manages to secure Mephilos's trump card, the Beta Box, which then leads to a fight between Mephilos and Ultraman, which I thought was done really, really well. One thing I want to say about Mephilos is how quirky he is with the quote stuff. He has a penchant for saying one of my favorite quotes, and he says, about like random human quotes. I forgot what they translated them as, but there was like one where he was like, I don't even remember. The only thing I can remember is the joke one I made, which is, you either come in the sink or sink in the cum. One of my favorite quotes.
I mean, that's the thing, though, is he is getting off a little bit on like how much he loves certain quotes.
Yeah.
It's hysterical. It rocked. And then you get the counter of like when things aren't going his way. He's like, one of my least favorite sayings. Oh man!
Like right before he turns to like big size with his beta capsule, I forget what he says. He says something, and he's like, one of my least favorite quotes, and then he click, click, and
it's so good. So Mephilas and Ultraman, they have a fight, and it's soon revealed that Ultraman might not be able to take this fight. And now a good little like meta takeaway here is like there is no color timer, but as Ultraman is like suffering in this fight, not able to beat him, he's turning all green.
Well, the red lines are turning green entirely.
Right. The red line. Thank you. The red lines are turning green, but like that's something that we saw towards the end of the original series. But I think it comes up multiple times in this movie, right?
Yeah, you see it in the fight with Gabora. I think you don't see it with the Zerub fight, but yeah, you see it again with Mephilas, and then in the final fight of the movie. So you see it around like 3 times.
Right. So Ultraman turning partly green replaces the color timer, which I think was better. I think it was a good choice.
Yeah,
I liked it.
Yeah. It still maintains that sort of like this guy is not invulnerable. He is not the god that you think he is. Element of it,
right? And I think it makes him look less like an action figure in a sense.
Yeah. But yeah, you were saying.
Oh yeah, so it's apparent that Ultraman will not be able to defeat Mephilas, and then right as Mephilas might decide to end this, he goes, "Oh shit!" And like we only see for a second, way in the background, there is another figure who looks like Ultraman, and then Mephilas hightails it out of there.
Yeah, and this figure, as we come to learn, is Zophie. Not Zophie, Zophie. So, one thing I really, really like is their interpretation of Zophie or Zophie in this one. So the interpretation that they went for with this movie comes from a misprinted encyclopedia from the 60s.
I love this.
So the thing what happened was this publisher wanted to get their encyclopedia out first, and so they didn't do much proofreading, and they put Zophie's title and picture under Zeton's or the Zeton aliens' description. So it made it sound like Zophie was like an evil alien trying to unleash the Zeton bioweapon on Ultraman. And to top it off, they spelled his name wrong. So it instead of like Zophie or in katakana, it's spelled as as it is the way you would pronounce Zophie, but they misspelled it, so the emphasis is on the O instead of the I/Y sound. So it's pronounced Zophie rather than Zophie. So that's what they went for with Shin Ultraman. They were like, yeah, let's just use that interpretation.
But it's really fun too because you can kind of see it like as kids maybe they're like watching the original Ultraman series and like they're getting excited for the end and they don't know what's about to happen. Then they read this fan theory basically and they're like, oh cool, I hope it goes that way. But then when they get their chance to make the movie, they're like, what if it did end that way?
Yeah, what if we actually did? And one thing I really 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 liked is again this is another Toru Narita design where instead of going for something that he used during the span of the original show, they went for 2 of his later artworks, Next and then Ultraman Divine Change, the latter of which is actually a concept art that they used for the Australian production of Ultraman Great. So the influences that they went for with this design is really weird, but my favorite design element of Zophie is the mask because like for the most part it is just the Shin Ultraman model copied over and repainted, but the mask itself is actually taken from a face scan of Ultraman Jack's mask, Ultraman Jack from Return of Ultraman. So Zophie has asymmetrical eyes.
Yeah, that was a really cool detail.
And like he's got like the extra line underneath, so it's very much like a callback to Return of Ultraman in a sense. But it really does go to show that at the end, even though you've got this like huge threat, that's like threatening to eliminate humanity, this is still Ano and Higuchi playing with their toys.
Yeah. But yeah, Zophie decides. Zophie's got this very different demeanor than Zerub and Mephilos. Like, they're just two weirdos who are trying to, like, become gods on this planet. And Zophie's like, no, fuck this. Things have gone too far. Now they've been introduced to our weapons. What's the difference between one less species in the universe? And to answer that question, I am going to unleash the Zeton weapon.
I'm just gonna eradicate this entire solar system.
Yeah, I mean, I really liked it. I liked Zophie. I mean, it's not that we don't see villains like that.
Mhm.
We do see the more calculating villains.
One thing I want to say, though,
but
sorry to cut in, I wouldn't even say that Zophie is like a villain, because obviously they're going for the the interpretation of Zeton, but in this case, it really is, again, playing into the bureaucratic element, a superior coming down and realizing that one of his workers made a fuck up in calculations or whatever, and he's like, all right, just scrap the entire project.
Yeah, no, I really like that. That's what I was trying to get at. It's not something you see so much.
Yeah. It's such a wonderful interpretation. But yeah, as you were saying.
No, it's cool. You said better than what I was trying to say. So anyways, Ultraman tries to fight the Zeton weapon, gets his ass kicked, and he has to go to the hospital in his mortal form. Then humanity is able to come together thanks to. It was a flash drive that Ultraman. That was a little unclear on what
he left
happened.
a flash drive with all the information on the beta system, which is like the system that allows him to transform and turn big.
Right. So the Earth scientists come together and figure out how to reverse engineer that, so that then you could, rather than pulling something big from this tesseract space, you can also go the other way and fold something back in. So the plan is get Ultraman outfitted with that technology, like retrofit it into his beta capsule. Then Ultraman can pop the beta capsule and then hopefully fold Zeton into time and space.
Which is that insane science mumbo jumbo. You know what? I'm just gonna say that you're right, because your interpretation of that all the science in that last segment is as good as mine.
It doesn't matter because it looks cool as hell.
It looks cool as hell, and that's what matters. I saw, because on the USB, it's a theorem paper, like something that you format for all the university students listening to this, or the former graduate students, whatever. If you've used LaTeX, the markup language, you'll notice that the theorem paper that he leaves behind for all the scientists is like formatted very much like a research paper. And the second I saw that, my brain immediately turned off. It shut off. I'm just like, I don't want to try and interpret this. I refuse to look at this.
But yeah, when he flies up to fight Zeton a second time, we get the iconic shot of Ultraman flying towards the camera. Audience lost it there. That was rad.
Yeah.
Then they do this like really thrilling black hole sequence of Zeton getting folded in. Then we get one of our last scenes. It's Zophie reflecting with Ultraman on, like, so this is the way you wanted to go down, bro? but it's very similar to the conversation they have at the end of Ultraman with the question of, has humanity grown on you so, Ultraman?
Yeah. And I think this is a great place to talk about the humanity element of this entire movie. Is that I think that this is a very humanist movie. Uh,
In what sense?
in many senses, I think this is like Ano and Higuchi's way of both summarizing what humanity is, has been, and can be. So it's interesting because in this segment, or the Zophie segment, if we're gonna call it that, we see a lot of this through one of the SSSP members that we've been seeing like a little bit of, but this one we really got to focus on Taki, the scientist of the crew. And like in the Mephiles segment, we see these two gods talking about humanity, but in this segment, we really get to see the impact, the mental impact of living amongst gods on a scientist. And you really get to see the sort of hopelessness, the minuscule feeling that someone who has dedicated his entire life to understanding the science of the universe, how that feels for him. And seeing that flipped at the end, and seeing all these scientists come together, seeing the rest of the world come together to create this theory that will save the world, I think is such a good way of flipping his own mentality, the Taki's own mentality on what humanity is, and pushes it towards the can be element of it.
Yeah, that.
No, no, no. I just want to say, is this the part where we go into like the globalism element of
I think it's both. I mean, I'm not. I don't know if I'm pushing back against what you're saying so much as I'm saying how that scene that you talked about like really contrasts with the rest of the film, because in the rest of the film, a lot of the both the philosophy and the politics of Japan and its relationship to the rest of the world, it feels a lot more resentful. Like I got a lot of resentment. I mean, like especially when like their office is being spied upon by like the CIA and some other organizations. And there's a resentment as well with like, oh, the United States, like it will just sell us more weapons, but won't offer us any other way to like fight these monsters. That's more in the first act. So yeah, I mean, I'm watching a lot of Ano's works right now. Like I'm doing an Evangelion watch through right now, and looking at Shin Godzilla and Shin Ultraman. Like there is something there, and like I think this is maybe the most optimistic I've seen him so far.
What I mean is like you see Shin Godzilla and you kind of get a feeling for what he's trying to say regarding like the human element of it, but I think this is the most optimistic that both Ano and Higuchi have gotten with this stuff. Like you really feel good by the end of it. Even
Right.
if before, there's all these elements of like, yeah, the governments are acting shitty, like humanity's still feeling very sequestered, and but at the end of it, you feel very optimistic about what we can achieve as humans.
It's the opposite of like the Ozymandias conceit from Watchmen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I'll dive more into the globalism aspect of it, because I think it was very interesting earlier on how they othered aliens in this movie. Like they specifically, so the subtitles, if you watched it subbed or even dubbed, they call them extraterrestrials. But in the Japanese, they call them Gai Seijin, or foreign planet person, if you want to be literal. Rather than Uchujin or Seijin, which is like space person, alien, like more in line of what you would think of when you think alien. There is that specific element of calling them foreigners. Like this alien is a foreign alien. This Gai Seijin is has made contact with our people. And I think it's really interesting to see how that plays into the politics of modern Japan. Just these are foreigners on our land. How are we reacting to them? How are we, collaborating with them? How are collaborating against them even? And, to going into sort of the first half, you're kind of thinking about how hostile it is. Like we mentioned earlier with the Zareb stuff and the Imitation Ultraman, like the hostility of the government towards Ultraman and how quickly they flipped that switch upon realizing that Ultraman was doing damage to them. I think it really does showcase a more xenophobic side of things. But
absolutely.
But on that note, it quickly gets flipped by the time you get to the Mephiles and the Zophi segment. When you start seeing them reaching out to the rest of the world for help with the theory, like that segment where Taki is, funny enough, using a VR headset to talk in English about this theory. I think it's the best interpretation of what Anno and Higuchi wanted to say about human collaboration. Earlier on in the movie, Ultraman remarks that humans are a social species. They need each other to survive. And we get hints of that, with his interactions with Asami, with his interactions with, humanity as a whole. But, the humanity collaborating with humanity element of that last bit, I think really, really showcases this sort of almost like a maturity even from Anno and Higuchi.
Yeah, it feels like an inversion of the conclusion of Shin Godzilla.
Exactly.
Yeah, Shin Godzilla, I was actually, in a way, it's a comedy. It's a dark comedy because, these endless meetings and terrible things are happening outside of the meetings. And these people just have to keep going ahead with decorum rather than we need to solve shit now. But the conclusion to defeating Godzilla in that film is these upstarts who don't have very high ranking positions pooling their resources and rebelling against the government. So it's a very sort of it's an insular solution that happens, right? Versus this is oh no, we need to actually reach out and expand to other people's voices.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, were you gonna say?
No, I mean, the only other thing there is this, like I said, it's a very humanist, optimistic work. There's a segment where Zophi and Ultraman are talking above, because we see Ultraman, I think, once or twice with the corpse of Kaminaga, or a projection of the corpse of Kaminaga. It's basically like a the Alas Poor Yorick thing, but it's all in his head. It's not actually Kaminaga's corpse there, but he's talking to Kaminaga as a corpse to sort of work through his feelings and his thoughts on humanity. So it's interesting to see Zophi enter that conversation, and Zophi and Ultraman conversing over the corpse of Kaminaga, and seeing it's the question of life and death, and you're doing it over a corpse. You're not only doing it over a corpse, you're talking to a man who is basically a reanimated corpse in a sense. So there is elements of life and death that Anno and Higuchi grapple with here as well. And
it's where I think the question of religion needs to be considered.
Yeah.
Because in the original series, the finale of the Ultraman series is really fun. It's got when Ultraman is called back to space by Zophi, Hayata runs out and he's like, "Wait, what? I thought what happened?" He hasn't remembered anything of the series. but this takes it more literal, and it says no, like Shinji has actually died, and his corpse has been possessed by Ultraman. So then, with our conclusion with Shinji being given a second chance at life,
what
I
a
can't.
beautiful final shot, by the way.
Oh yeah, it rocked. Little callback to James Cameron's Avatar. Love to see it.
Yes,
but it feels very Christian to me, and I'm not praising that. I'm not criticizing it. It's just I think it needs to be considered because like Tsuburaya himself was Christian, and
Christianity is like a huge element of the Ultra series. Like there are
right.
literally parts where they all get crucified.
Oh no. I mean, like I've even heard the claim that like his like laser beam that he fires by crossing his hands is meant to represent like the crucifix. You can't say whether that's true or false. It's just a rumor. But like, I didn't know about the crucifix. Like that's a thing, right?
A thing.
So there is this Christian ideal, and if you consider it an ideal, right? If we want to tie the politics and even something greater, it's like when you give yourself up to an ideal based in love and compassion, you can live forever.
Yeah. And I mean, it is also sort of the rebirth element of it. Like born again. He's a born again Ultraman.
Yeah, now he'll go door to door to other planets, seeing who else wants to become an Ultraman.
Yeah. I mean, Christianity's also been a huge element in Anno's own. Like you said, you're watching Evangelion, so you're probably going to see that very, very soon if you haven't already.
Oh, I mean, it comes up right away.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's crucifixions, and there's a lot of names from the Bible. I mean, if I want to give Anno credit for anything that keeps him interesting to me as a writer, it's that the things that fascinate him, he has complex relationships with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Zeton is a giant cross in the sky. Like, that's such a cool
It is
image.
literally a crucifix in the sky, raining down death on
death
Earth.
Hovering over you. Yeah. And so it's like, what I like about this film is like, it deals with Christian imagery, but it's not praising it, and it's not condemning it, but it's saying there is an upside and a downside to this. Like, Christ can be, something that makes you reborn and gives you eternal life. Christ can also be like the threat of death looming over you.
Exactly.
And I guess while I'm thinking of like Anno and his philosophy, like I am really fascinated with Anno's politics, partly because they're not neat. You can't neatly say like this is Anno's politics.
Right.
Like, I've heard the criticism of Shin Godzilla that it's a film that can appeal to people on the right. I don't really follow the argument, but it's like Shin Godzilla is this nationalist concept, and it's partly because like, oh, it's these intellectuals in the government that are making decisions and not focusing on the regular people. Like, I don't agree with it, but I do see a sort of core truth that like Anno does seem to have like this fascination with the bureaucracy. He like borderline like praises them, but like at the same time, he clearly has a love-hate relationship with that. I don't know. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Right. I mean, yeah, like we saw that in the interview with Hiroko Sakurai. It's like he is so quick to say that he wants to focus on revitalizing the TDF, like the bureaucrats of the universe. So it's clearly something that's always been on his mind, and I really wonder how that's going to work into the third iteration of the Shin series, which we'll get into in a bit. But Anno's really always been a guy who's focused on the organization of humans. Like, this isn't just like a bureaucracy thing. I think it's just like a prevalent thing in his works is just like, how do humans organize? Like, how does that propagate from level to level in this hierarchy? Even if we're going back to the whole Christianity element of it, it's like, like, how does that organization of religion affect my characters? So I think it's not something that he has like an inherently positive or negative relationship with. It's something that he is trying to grapple with to really understand, like why these things exist, why these structures exist.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful answer. I really like that. I guess my last sort of note on Anno for now is looking at the Shin universe as a greater project, and this is my like last galaxy brain take of the day. But like, I see Shin Ultraman through and through as a sequel to Shin Godzilla, like full on sequel. And I know some people don't see that because there were some people who like they really want like crossovers. They want to see the two guys fighting or whatever. And like I don't care about that really. Like I see them as like spiritual sequels and narrative sequels. And the reason is like I don't know if this will carry over for the home release, but at the Fathom event, the we see the Ultraman logo, the Shin Ultraman logo, immediately followed by the Shin Godzilla
Oh
logo.
yeah. They're definitely going to keep that. That's the movie itself. Yeah.
Right. And then right after that, we see Shin Gomez. And, like, of course, Gomez is, like, the first creature in Ultra Q. Like, there's a lot of reasons to do that. But I think you can also interpret the defeat of Shin Gomez as, like, a sort of recap of the defeat of
Shin Godzilla.
Shin Godzilla, right? And
Yeah.
it goes further. Like, okay, they refine their methods. They learn how to kill monsters better. They create new departments. I think even, like, in the cast, what the actor playing Shinji, like the fact that he is in the last movie, you could even see him as like maybe he's a soldier who goes on to become something more and join the SSP. Like, and I think the character that like really solidified that for me was the aide to the prime minister in the first film. The actor's name is Yutaka Takenuchi.
Hmm.
Like he comes back
And
and he's working for like a new prime
he's working for
minister.
a new prime minister, and he's also like the contact point for the SSSB. Which again, the
Right.
bureaucracy on top of the ultra support team. That's exactly like he is the he is the embodiment of what Anno wanted to work on. If he had his chance with his own ultra series.
Yeah. So like I see it all right there. And like to me it's kind of better that it's not all out in the open that like this is a sequel. It's like you can just see the threads and that's really fulfilling for me on its own. And I guess I'm really curious to see how, if at all, that carries into Shin Kamen Rider because it's such a different tone and the scale will be so different.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what he does with Shin Kamen Rider. We're only like 2 months away from its release in Japan, and so we've been getting more ideas of gonna be, and I think there's actually like a prologue manga right now, like detailing like the shocker side of things. So it's again, Ka- Kamen Rider also has big organizations, big governmental bodies, if you will. So it's again another thing that's completely up the alley for these creators, and it's gonna be interesting to see how they reformat that for a modern and like a Shin context. Because I can definitely see the through line between Shin Godzilla and Shin Ultraman, but I wonder what through line between Shin Ultraman and Shin Kamen Rider is going to be. Obviously, it's
Yeah, I mean, like,
and like you said, it's not going to be an explicit one. It's at times it's going to be spiritual, at times it's going to be sort of meta contextual. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they tackle it.
I don't know a ton about Shitaro Ishinomori's work, even though like everything I've seen from him so far rules. I want to like get all my hands on all of his stuff, but like what I do know about Shocker is like it's like a Nazi
Yep.
organization, right? So I mean, I'm really excited for that. Like I can't wait to see them have to deal with something a little more explicitly political. You know what I
Mm.
mean?
Or I guess explicitly political and inherently negative.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say. Yeah, yes, there's politics abound in these movies, but like, yeah, like how do you deal with like the far right? Because like that's something that's always so tricky to deal with in Japanese media because of all these really complex relationships to
I
fascism.
mean, Higuchi himself is a bit more familiar because Higuchi was the special effects director on Black Sun, Kamen Rider Black Sun.
Oh shit, that's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. So Higuchi's got his ideas, but I don't
Hell
think
yeah.
Higuchi is involved with Shin Kamen Rider, which is interesting.
Huh.
I wonder what happened there. But yeah, Shin Kamen Rider is the next iteration in the Shin series, if you will. And concurrently with that, they have the Shin Japan Heroes universe. So they have four tenets, the four pillars of this Shin Japan Heroes universe are Shin Godzilla, Shin Ultraman, Shin Kamen Rider, and then the Neon Genesis Evangelion rebuilds, which Anno has rechristened as Shin Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Wait, are you saying that the more recent Evangelion films are considered part of the like Shin canon?
Well, here's the thing: Shin Japan Heroes Universe is purely a merchandising thing.
Right, they're like selling posters and action figures and like pachinko machines,
Yeah,
right?
and I don't. So me personally, I've seen the original series, but I haven't seen any of the rebuilds, so I can't tell you anything about the through lines or the threads or anything there. But I
Yeah.
think that would be a good thing for us to try and revisit if we wanna do that.
Evangelion?
Yeah, especially the rebuilds.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
and
totally. I'm almost done with the main
but it
series.
was funny to see for the Shin Japan Heroes universe thing. Higuchi himself explicitly stated that their goal was not to recreate the MCU, like a Toku MCU thing, which I found was very funny. They're like, "Yeah, this is the exact opposite of what we want to do here."
Yeah, I mean, I really like the idea of like bringing back a lot of the same talent and making nods to the previous films.
It's
That's like my
also
ideal cinematic
it's also
universe.
like uh it pays homage to the original series because like Ultraman took actors from the previous iteration, Ultra Q, and
Right.
recast them in new roles. It's the same thing here.
Right, right. Well, we did it. We got to say all the things about all those incarnations of Ultraman. Was there anything else you wanted to go over, Lan?
Ooh, no, that is pretty much it. Yeah, we're probably not gonna do a Shin Kamen Rider thing until it obviously comes out in in the North American whatever. I'm
I like your.
we've gotten to that point in the podcast where I'm really, really flubbing now.
That's okay. I mean, I guess just want to ask you now. Like you'd mentioned doing the doing the Kamen Rider manga, the original one. I think that could pair really nicely
I think
in an
that's got to be
episode.
its own thing. That thing is fucking thick. That thing is a
Yeah.
brick. There's no way we can have that share an episode with
Yeah. Okay. Well,
anything.
then we'll have to do that, and then we'll have to do a separate episode for the original Kamen Rider series because
Yes,
I
of
would love
course.
to do a watch through of that.
One thing I actually do want to do when we do get around to Shin Kamen Rider, whenever that is to read Insufficient Direction, which is the manga that Moyoko Ano did, because that is probably the best look into the mind of Ano and his fandom with with Kamen Rider. So I'm gonna write down a little note that when we do get to Shin Kamen Rider, we'll do that too.
Hell yeah, because yeah, I think pairing all these up in this episode it seems counterintuitive, but it works really well for having a greater
Yeah.
understanding of everything. Cool. Well, quick, blah, blah, house cleaning or housekeeping. Just wanted to say if you want to email us, we are midnightgrappleranimals@gmail.com. You can submit questions or suggestions. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and if you want to follow us individually, we're not doing a Twitter for this thing because Twitter's on its dying legs. But if you want to follow us, I'm at Land Tweets on Twitter, and Salt is Salt M Bank on Twitter. Salty had a really great viral tweet. I think it was yesterday or the day before.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was really good. So if you want to see what that
my
tweet was,
my Landis one.
yeah, the Landis one. So if you want to go see what that one was about, follow Salt. It's Salt M Bank. Anything else we can plug here? We don't have a Patreon yet. We don't have.
Yeah, but that might be in the works.
Might be,
And
might be.
you know, though our listenership be small, we thank you all for coming with us on this journey.
Yeah, and if you like this, spread it around so we can do more of this. You know, I think I finally entered the phase of where I want to do this more seriously, and it'll be great to get whatever listenership we can.
And I really enjoy making this with you.
Thanks, man. I really enjoy making this with you too.
Aw. All right. Bye, everyone.
All right, bye. See ya. In the decade to come, the studio will release. Oh, I said realize, didn't I?
That's okay.
Yeah. Okay. In the